Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop. We're a podcast journalist,
a filmmaker,
and a cultural critic burst pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
We're adopted!
Even today. Still.
Always adopted.
Just like last week.
That's right.
So we have all done DNA testing. I am curious, do either of you have any Irish in your backgrounds?
Yes, I do. I am Central Scotland and North Ireland from my paternal side. Very small.
Okay. A small percentage?
Amount. Yes. Haley?
Okay. I, also including Scotland, I'm 30%. Yeah, a majority of that comes from my maternal side. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Sullivan?
I am 29% Irish. The vast majority of that comes from my maternal side. And so at certain times of year, I think we're all a little bit Irish. And through the power of film, we went all the way back to Ireland for this week's episode. Philomena is the story of Philomena Lee, a woman from County Limerick who searched for 50 years to find the son she was forced to relinquish as a young woman. The film, adapted from the 2009 book The Lost Child of Philomena Lee by journalist Martin Sixsmith, was a critical success and was nominated for a slew of awards, including 25 nominations for Dame Judi Dench's portrayal of birth mother Philomena Lee. Haley, this was a first watch for you. What were your impressions of Philomena?
I love this movie. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before because of what I do for my other job, which is host a podcast about adoption. And so I was like, I guess avoiding it because it was too much adoption, but here I can't do that. And I loved it so much. I cried multiple times and I loved Judi Dench and Philomena. I loved it. And I also loved the reporter. So great pick. 5 stars. What about for you guys? Kristal?
I had seen this film when it came out years ago, and I remember it really was emotional. And same, like Philomena, great actress, Judi Dench, and then the chemistry between the two, her and the reporter was so spot on. Well done. Great film. Really great film. Really emotional. Hard to watch.
This was also a first watch for me. I had never seen it before. I remember when it came out and it just wasn't a priority for me. I think like you, Haley, because of the subject matter, I was just not particularly interested. And so I also really enjoyed the film. I did what I do, which is once we selected this, I read the book first. The book, actually, I absolutely loved the book as well. And so we're going to be talking about some of what the book offers and some of what the film offers throughout. But I also really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it brought up a lot of stuff for me because my adoptive mother was also a first mother and searched for her son for almost 60 years. She also had a relationship with him and would visit him for the first 2 years of his life. And when she and my dad were going to get married, she went back and wanted to claim him back. And he had been adopted right out from underneath her. He was told that our parents were drug addicts, that they didn't love him, that they didn't want him. And this poor man grew up believing this. And so much of this film evoked a lot of compassion and empathy for my adoptive mother and for her son. It was a hard watch.
I can only imagine, Kristal. And of course, you were born in Canada, and your adoptive parents are Canadian. This story takes place in Ireland, and I raise that because so many of these stories now that we cover, those stories that are based upon true stories, or at least have backgrounds that are based in fact, we see in different countries, in different continents, but very much the same stories. And as you alluded to, Philomena Lee was born in Ireland, and she was, I was going to say, found herself pregnant. You know, everything I read about this used the term "fell pregnant," which, I don't know. I've fallen before, but I've never fallen pregnant.
Isn't that just a British term? Like, I feel like that's just British lingo.
I know, but the problem I have with it, and I've raised this before, is that it takes two. Like, it's not like, oops, I tripped, now I'm preggers. Like, it just, you know.
And Philomena enjoyed the fall. She enjoyed it.
And good for her.
My favorite line of that was, "Martin, I didn't even know I had a clitoris."
Yes. Well, so Philomena is in fact pregnant, and this is in the early 1950s. This is at a time when, and she was Catholic as well in Ireland. And so this was a time when it was wholly unacceptable for any woman, let alone a young woman, Catholic woman, to be pregnant without a husband. And so her father, she had siblings. Her mother had passed away when she was young. Her father sent her to Sean Ross Abbey in order to have the baby at that time. And that scene of her having the baby was really emotional. Haley, you're shaking your head.
I mean, I started off crying. And it's certainly the scene, yes. And it brings up all the past knowledge I have of reading that this happened to so many mothers, thousands and thousands of mothers, just shaming them, this is your fault, and the terror that frankly any woman has when they're about to give birth. They don't know what's going to happen, and hopefully you have a supportive partner, or at least the nursing staff and the doctors are like supportive and helpful to you in this very traumatic, often, and vulnerable point in time. And instead she had no one, and just I might say shame 50 times during this conversation. Just the shame. It's just really upsetting to know that this is true. This is totally true.
From a numbers standpoint, between 1922 and 1998, 56,000 women in Ireland and 57,000 children were the children born in these homes, mostly run by nuns and placed for adoption.
One thing I think I didn't really understand. So I knew about Magdalene laundries, and I knew about the forced indentured servanthood. Like, I knew that they would make mothers pay for the quote unquote, big air quotes here, care they received, as well as their young children. I didn't know that they kept their young children for a period of time until they could be adopted out. Like, I kind of pictured it in one door and out the other. But this movie showed us that some of them got to stay with their children for a couple of years, and that there was only limited time where they could like have a visit with their child. So it wasn't like they were, together for that time period. The nuns were taking care of the children while the mothers were literally doing laundry, scrubbing clothes, and really hard physical labor.
So to your point, Haley, the law changed right around the time when Philomena was at the Sean Ross Abbey and had just given birth to her son. She named Anthony, which is prior to that time, you had a situation where predominantly American families were coming to Ireland and purchasing Irish babies from these homes. And there was a very famous case of the actress Jane Russell, who wanted a child and did just that. Flew to Ireland within a matter of days, adopted an Irish child, and took her child back to the United States. And that hit the media at the time. And it was actually a huge scandal. People came down on all sides of the issue. And again, Jane Russell was very famous at the time. And so some people came down and said, look, this little boy who was born into poverty is getting a better life. Others, particularly in Ireland and the UK, said, why are we selling our children? And there, on the heels of that, there was a law change in Ireland. The law change really didn't go as far as some people wanted it to. It didn't prevent the sale of small children to families, but what it did do is make it much harder to adopt out children under the age of 2. It had to do with granting passports and like all of this kind of stuff. And so rather than say, hey, we're not going to export our children, they made it very difficult to do under the age of 2. And so what you wound up happening is what we see in this movie, which is the mothers and their children are in the abbey for 3 years. And then at 3, the children become adoptable, because at that point in time, you have this very quick grant of passports and the export of children. And also we see what is supposedly informed consent, right, of the mothers signing a form that says, not only do I relinquish my child, but I promise never to search for them. And these were, again, forced upon these very young women, these women that didn't understand what they were signing, women that didn't have a lot of power to fight back, but then to say, for people outside to say, well, look, she signed away her rights.
In order for a mother to claim her child and take them away and parent them, they owed a debt to the whatever facility they were in. And so, and they had no way to pay that. And we see that happening in current day, where adoption agencies will provide housing and some medical care during an expectant mother's pregnancy. And then if they decide to parent, the adoption agency will often be like, well, look what you owe us. So I'm still seeing this like current day. But back to Philomena's story, Anthony gets adopted when he's 3. Kristal, did you have thoughts about when that happened?
I mean, she saw that it was her friend's daughter that was going to potentially be adopted, and she was feeling grief for her friend and just beside herself about it. And then they end up taking both Anthony and her friend's daughter together. They came for one and they left with 2. And you know, the windows are frosted, so she's got to climb up, and she's, you know, just trying to catch a peek of what's happening. She runs out. The car drives away, and Anthony is looking back at her through the window, and I mean, it makes me cry just thinking about it. It was so sad. I can't imagine. I mean, they had 1 hour a day with their babies, with their children. And the mothers would run to them, like that scene of the mothers running to their babies. I'm really struggling for words with this. It was just so painful to watch.
It's like inhumane, right? Who would we treat like that? And to not even give them the dignity to say goodbye to their child. I mean, I've said it before. Is that the least you could do? I don't know.
There's this strange juxtaposition also, because in society's eyes, and certainly in the Catholic Church's eyes, these girls didn't deserve dignity, right? Because they were sinners. They were the worst of the worst. And therefore that justified their inhumane treatment. And meanwhile, the church told prospective adoptive parents about what high quality these girls were and their families were, right? Because people want quality babies, whatever that means. And so this idea that you would make these girls, shame these girls so thoroughly, and at the same time talk about how good they are in order to sell their babies.
Talking out of both sides of their mouth. And we see that so much in adoption. You're right. Inhumane is exactly what it was. And the shame that these women carried for their whole lives. And I saw this with my mom. Like she could not talk about her son until she found him. She couldn't. It was so painful. It haunted her whole life. And we see Philomena go through how she sort of pictures Anthony's life. And she sees it, the way that the film shows it is through old home videos. And that's like her imagination, what she was picturing he might be doing or how old he might be at that time. It's a really beautiful way to depict that in the film. I thought it was really well done.
We mentioned Anthony is adopted. He's adopted by a family called the Hesses. The Hesses live in the Midwest. And as we alluded to, the Hesses were shopping for a girl. They had 3 sons. Their youngest passed away as a child, as a 5-year-old, tragically. And we're told that they're looking for a girl. And in fact, I'll allude to the book for a minute, because like any book can sort of tell more than the movie. But we're told very clearly in the book that that the husband, he goes by Doc Hess, wants a girl. And so they identify a girl at Sean Ross Abbey, a little girl named Mary. Mary is the daughter of Philomena's best friend. And that was something also we only see a hint of in the film, but Philomena had a best friend there named Margaret. And their kids, Mary and Anthony, were the same age. And they loved each other. These 2 little children loved each other, and they grew up together. And so when the Hesses come to take Mary, they see Anthony really doting on her and really not wanting to be separated from her. And so Mrs. Hess calls home to her husband and says, can I take the boy too? And he says yes. And that's how Philomena is separated from Anthony, and his name is changed to Michael at that point in time. And so her son becomes Michael Hess in the U.S.
I didn't know that part about them being so close. It almost makes me feel like a bit of relief for him that they both had someone that they knew. Not that makes it any better.
They had vowed, Philomena and Margaret had vowed that the nuns weren't going to take their babies. They talked about running away. They talked about fighting back. That was their plan was not to let their babies be adopted. And they were ultimately completely understandably unable to action that plan. As you said, Haley, they really had they had no agency at all. In that place.
Well, and Philomena tells Martin, I could have left if I paid £100, but where would I go? And how would I get that kind of money? And Philomena's father told everybody that Philomena was dead. So she literally had no support. And it was an impossible situation for her.
So should we fast forward 47 years? And there's this connection that's made with this journalist, Martin, who is having some work troubles and reluctantly gets kind of roped in to writing a story. What's it called? Personal interest story or human interest?
Human interest.
Human interest. And the human interest story ends up being Philomena looking for Anthony. And they just have this like really sweet curmudgeonly relationship, curmudgeonly on Martin's part and Philomena sweet on her part. But one of the first things I want to talk about is, Martin has to sell the story idea to an editor. And so we see his interactions with this editor a couple of points through the film. And I wanted to highlight this because this is sold as a story, like our story. And how adoptees and first mothers are treated in the media is obviously important to us, just based on the very nature of our show. And so I wrote down a couple of quotes from the editor. And she says, like, the story, as long as it's really happy or really sad, like, then it's okay, right? This is what she's hoping for. And do I spoil? I guess I'm spoiling this. In their next conversation, Philomena and Martin have discovered that her son Anthony has actually passed. And so Martin is reporting this back to the editor. And the editor says, "Dead or alive, happy or sad, they're both good. Spin it." And Martin is like, well, Philomena wants to go home, and because they're in America at this point and wanting to find out more about Anthony, but then they have this news, and Philomena is like ready to go, and the editor insists keep her there, and Martin says she's in bits. It's like she's lost him all over again, and the editor says that's great. Write that line down, and to picture us as a story. And that our pain is the story that the public is interested in. This just hit me as like so true. That's how it hit me. How about you? Did that land?
Yeah, I was just talking with a fellow adoptee yesterday, and she said people will often say like, "Oh, tell me your story," and she's like, "This isn't some story fairy tale. These are the facts of my life. Like, these are the things that I lived and had to endure and go through." And I mean, yeah.
We should say along those lines also that the real Philomena Lee and her daughter and Anthony Michael Hess's partner were all supportive of the film.
So I, fast forwarded, I kind of alluded to this, but they, Philomena and Martin go to the US and they're in search of Anthony. They find out that his name has been changed to Michael and he's passed on. This is about halfway through the movie. And Martin gets a photo of Michael in the White House. Are they in the Oval Office, I think? And so Michael is a lawyer and he's working there. And at the time, Martin is also a journalist. And so Philomena is looking at this photo of Michael as an adult and she's like taking it all in. And then she notices that Martin is also in the photo. And Philomena immediately is like, you met him. And Martin's kind of like, I guess he does recall it. I don't know if he truthfully recalls it or he's like, yeah, I shook his hand. I said hello. And Philomena taking in in wanting all these very specific details about Michael, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly how I was in finding out details about both of my biological parents. In my non-identifying information, it said my mother was a reader. And I was like, oh my God, she's a reader. Me too. Right. And it's just like these like little things like, oh, he had a firm handshake. It's like, is that all we get? Is this like little piece of information? But like, that's like so precious. I don't know if either of you related to that in particular, but I was just like, yeah, I get that. I totally get that feeling.
Yeah. She's like, he said hello. He was polite. He had a firm handshake. And the way, her acting was just top notch. And really indicative of that experience of somebody that just wants to know anything to fill in the gaps, anything. And speaking of filling in the gaps, as she goes along on this journey, and I related to this as I went along on my search journey, you get a little bit of information and then you kind of come up to a barrier, and then you fill in the gaps in your mind. Oh, well, maybe this happened, maybe that happened, maybe that, and that's where your mind goes as a mother. If your kids don't come home, they're 5 minutes late even, you're like, what could have happened to them, so
one of my kids went to bed with a headache the other night, and I was literally Googling like what could possibly have like signs of brain aneurysm. Like, how would you know, like, in what kind of headache would yeah. And so imagine not having any knowledge for 47 years, the worries and stories you might tell yourself.
That scene where they are at the Lincoln Memorial and she's thinking about all of these things that she could find, what she doesn't imagine is that he's dead, right? Like, this is before she learns he has passed away. And for adopted people, and I also presume, birth and first parents as well, it's an equal possibility. And I know, like, I found a grave. And so I think, to go back to this, for non-adopted people that are like really hungry for our story and they like want the tea and that kind of stuff, like for us, it's not only our reality, but we come up against gravestones. We come up against family members that are alive and refuse to speak to us. We come up against family members that will speak to us, but will say, but you can't tell anyone, because for whatever reason. And so I raise that because I think in that scene, Philomena is sort of thinking like the worst thing she could discover is perhaps her son has been, disabled somehow. Like, that's what she's sort of picturing, like the worst case scenario. And, for us, we come across a lot of other things as well. And for non-adoptees that just want our story, like, they don't think of any of those things that we then are required to process on top of everything else.
If you're okay to talk about it, what was that another level of grief for you when you did find a gravestone, Sullivan?
I feel like yes and no. I mean, yes, because it meant that all of these questions that were unanswered were not going to get answered. So from that standpoint, yes. By the time I found her, she had been dead 21 years. I think for me, I know some adoptees talk about, I think they feel very close to their biological mothers, their first mothers. They talk about it. I've heard other adoptees talk about it before. Like, I just want my mom. Like, I've never had those feelings. I've never felt, to my knowledge, I have never felt any sort of biological connection at all. She died. I'm not going to be able to do the math here on the phone, but she died. I was in my early 20s when she died. And so at this point, I've spent as much of my life with that. She was dead for as much of my life as she was alive for. I never met her. So it made sense to me then why, like, oh, this is why I don't feel a connection either, because like she's been dead for 20 years also. So like from that standpoint, it was like, it wasn't that big of a, perhaps I would have felt different if, she had died 6 months earlier or something like that. But like this idea of like, oh, if I just looked earlier, like it was so long ago, it sort of felt like it didn't matter. I don't know if that makes sense, Kristal, or if you resonated
totally.
at all with that.
It totally does, because I think what you're talking about is the ability to have acceptance that it's not possible for you to get maybe the answers that you needed from her. Whereas if you still have a parent too that like is alive, there's still that possibility that they could or they couldn't give you the answers, or if they do give you the answers, are they true? Like, there's that real sense of finality, I think. And for so much time to have gone by since she passed, that makes perfect sense to me.
I should also say as well, my father was dead too, so I found a grave on both sides. I am in reunion with my paternal half siblings though. They did not know I existed. To our knowledge, my father did not know I existed either. But I am very fortunate that my paternal side has welcomed me with open arms. And that has been wonderful. I remain and will remain without answers, though, because, they were children when I was conceived. We can only sort of guess about a lot of things there, but, they don't know, and they would have no way of knowing a lot of information either.
Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. Let's go to Philomena trying to fill in some of those gaps in knowledge about her son by trying to meet folks who knew him in real life. And one of those people was his sister, Mary, that he was adopted with. We talked about that earlier. And Kristal, did you have thoughts when Mary came on the screen?
I was like, come on, just be nice. Just be nice. She's a little old Irish lady. She just wants answers. Certainly not somebody who has explored their own adoption or, the happenings around that. You hear this a lot where there'll be two adopted children adopted into the same family, and then they never talk about being adopted. And she says that, oh no, me and Michael never really talked about it. And that's so common. You've got somebody there that gets it or has been through it. I mean, we've searched our whole lives to find community, adoptee community and connection. And here, some of us had it our whole lives, but never tapped in just because we didn't have that awareness, right? So that was interesting to me. But yeah, she was prickly. She said that they didn't have a very good childhood growing up. And so I can imagine that she didn't really want to talk about things. It was a painful topic in her life.
Yeah, there was at least one other estrangement with one of the other children and their father. Something about when you're talking about Kristal there, as two adopted siblings in the same house, that I wish the film had depicted Mary differently than
Me too.
Than the book. I felt like, having read the book, I felt like I had a whole very different vision of Mary than the film let on. Because they were super close. They were really, really close. And now being close and talking about adoption is two different things, for sure. But I wanted to share one quick scene from the book that I really wish they had put in the movie, because it says a lot. And when they were adopted and they came home to the US. And again, they're little, they're like 3-ish years old, but old enough to speak, right? Old enough to speak and have language. That Michael would speak to his parents, and Mary wouldn't. And Mary was speaking gibberish. She did not speak English. And it caused so much consternation for the parents that they were ready not only to seek out medical intervention, but to send her back to Ireland. They were that upset about the fact that this kid would not converse. They would speak to Michael, and Michael would speak to Mary in their made-up gibberish language that only the two of them shared. And Michael was the translator, and the Hesses were pissed about it. And so the last resort before sending her back as defective was to seek out medical intervention. And guess what? There's nothing wrong with this kid. She just speaks Gaelic. And then they realized, oh, Mary's not comfortable speaking English. So she will speak Gaelic to Michael, and Michael will translate it into English for their parents and translate their English back to Gaelic for Mary. And they realized that. And then of course they did, as they do, say, you're not allowed to speak Gaelic anymore. You have to speak English. But it put an end to the communication in Gaelic. And I share that because that whole thing, that whole idea of, yes, when kids are born, kids have their own language. They understand the language of their country and their culture, of course. And why would we expect them to get dropped into another country and know the language? That's crazy. But the book really portrayed Michael and Mary as being really very close throughout their lives.
I love that they were close. And so is the book based on the true story?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, yes, it is. And the book and the film, for the most part, match. For the most part, the two are in harmony, for the most part. But what is most different about the book, the title of the movie is Philomena, and it's Philomena's search for her son. The title of the book is The Lost Child of Philomena Lee. The book is Michael Hess's biography, is really what it is. And so the author, Martin Sixsmith, is a journalist first. So the book is very much reportage, and in the style of reportage. But it begins with, Philomena going to the Abbey pregnant. It tells a bit of her backstory. It tells what's going on in the Irish government at the time. And then once Michael is born, it follows Michael. And it really follows Michael up into his death. There is very little of Philomena. After Michael leaves the orphanage, there is almost nothing of Philomena in the book. And so for me, I would really encourage listeners and viewers, if this story is of all interest to you, and again, it's a fantastic movie and a great book, and you are someone that likes to read as well as watch films. I actually did it on audio. The audio was great. I would say do them both, because doing them both is actually going to give you two different points of view on the same story. And they are not contrary points of view. They are just different points of view.
Are you saying that Michael thought of Philomena through his life?
Constantly. Constantly. He thought about her all the time. And also what was really shocking reading the book is, there's a period in his life, in his late adolescence, where he's having a lot of troubles. I would say that the sort of troubles that every adolescent has. And also, I think we may have alluded to this before, but Michael was gay. And so also coming to terms with his own sexuality in the Midwest in the 60s and 70s had to have been extremely difficult. As a Catholic also. And so there you see him going through troubles and seeking out support. I think he's not given the support that he deserves, certainly. But so much of what the doctors and the clergy that he speak to, while they fall horrifically short as it relates to understanding and having empathy for his sexuality and that coming into consciousness. I was shocked to hear the science around adoption at the time, because you have these doctors in the 60s and 70s saying exactly what we know to be the case today, which is parental separation and maternal separation, and it alters the brain and it causes separation trauma and all this stuff that I think, I don't know, for me, I'm sort of led to believe this is like new news. I'm like, this is not new news. Like, this is not new news. There were doctors, as reported by Martin Sixsmith in this book, in the 60s and 70s, talking about it, very clearly talking about it. And so, the adoption and the separation trauma was huge for Michael for the entirety of his life.
That makes me so happy to hear that, because Philomena is tortured by the thought of, did he ever even think of me? Did he wonder about me at all? Did he ever talk about Ireland? And before we go there, Philomena goes to the place where she was held captive, really, and where her and Anthony lived for a period of time, where she worked really hard. And she goes back to get some answers. And I'm curious as to what the two of you think about how protective she was over the nuns at this place. Because I was just like, I mean, this woman is gracious. Philomena is gracious.
I struggle with this. I think, yes, some of it is her personality. And as someone who is deeply religious, like, she's Catholic. And so to critique the church is to, I'm assuming for her, is to critique God in some way. And so holding the complexity of that, and we see her struggle with it, and we see Martin, a lapsed Catholic, he doesn't believe in God anymore. They have these conversations, and Martin is very easy to critique the nuns, critique the church. It's blatantly obvious. I mean, to all of us looking in, it's totally obvious. Like, there is wrongdoing here by the humans who are running God's church, and so that's what I see, the struggle for Philomena. And she also says this thing, just check my notes here, talking about sin and shame. And so this is the sin, having premarital sex and, creating this human, or is it a sin to keep what happened hidden and lying about that I had this child? And so she's conflicted in that as well. And she's like, what's the worst sin? So to me, her fear of critiquing the church is it's about her relationship with God. And so she's very, like, I think that's at the depth of it.
I will add as well that in the 2020s, the Irish government did do a full investigation into these mother and baby homes that were run by the Catholic Church, and published a report that is 2,865 pages long. We will link to it in the show notes. But as The Guardian reported in 2021, the report found no evidence of sexual abuse and little evidence of physical abuse, though that's a version challenged by some survivors. However, the report documented cruelty, intolerance, neglect, and an appalling infant mortality rate about double the national average. And again, these were all Catholic-run mother and baby homes. We talked a bit about the money that the women would have to pay if they left. The government was also paying to house these women and their children. The women, as we pointed out, were working 7 days a week, and you see that in the movie, for free. And so these were this was a money-making scheme. This was a money-making scheme for the Catholic Church. And again, that's documented at this point.
We see Philomena meet Michael's partner, longtime partner, Pete. And Pete is the one that tells her that Michael did indeed think of her. And in fact, his dying wish was to be buried at Roscrea. And she even sees him going back. There's video of him. Kristal talked before about these home movies we see videos of him, and I believe it's kind of like the funeral montage that's been put together for his service that would have been held years ago. And they're like, oh my God, he was there. He was searching for her his whole life, and he was buried there. And like, oh my God, like that just broke me. And then we see Philomena get to visit his grave, and I thought about that, like, what would you do to hold your baby again? Like, would you like lay down on, like, that was just really it was really hard to watch, but I was so happy for her, like, to talk about that finality of closure of finding a grave. Sullivan, like, I thought, okay, now she can like now there's the next stage for her. You may have thoughts on that too. I want to say just before Philomena goes to be able to see his grave, like, there's a confrontation that happens with the nuns, because as we see in the video, Michael meets literally one of the same nuns that Philomena has gone to on multiple occasions. Will you help me find my son? Of course we can. So sorry, we couldn't find anything. Michael has the same experience. Can you help me find my mother? Of course we can. Oh, I'm sorry. She abandoned you. There's no information about who she is. The very same people. While he's dying, they lie to her. They lie to him. And Martin is the one who goes in so hard. And I was like, yes, Martin gets it. He gets it the whole movie. Like, gold star for Martin. He's like, this is disgusting. Lying to a dying man, that's not very Christian. And the nun talks about women, this older nun. And those girls have nobody to blame but themselves. This actress is very good. She looks hateful. Her face looks hateful. And I thought, yeah, that is absolutely the attitude of the care, in quotation marks, that these girls received, girls and young women. And imagine taking that to your grave. I just, brutal. Okay, I gotta stop talking so you guys can chime in on those things.
To your point, Haley, I wrote down a quote. The quote is from earlier. As we talked about, Philomena goes to the Abbey. Michael, her son, Michael Anthony, goes to the Abbey. There are multiple trips by both of them to the Abbey. And I wrote down a quote this is from an earlier trip to the Abbey, but it goes to your point, Haley. Because they tell Philomena that all of the records have burned in a fire. They can't find Michael because all the records have burned in a fire. But they do come out with her waiver of rights that she signed. And Martin says to her, all the paper designed to help you find him has been destroyed. The one piece of paper designed to stop you has been lovingly preserved. And that really hit me. I want to say one other thing to your point, Haley, again, about this, like, supposedly Christian nuns, but they were treating people in this horrific way. And this gap between what people say they stand for and then what their actions show they actually stand for. We mentioned a few times Judi Dench, phenomenal actress. I mentioned at the top, she was nominated by 25 different organizations for some sort of Best Actress award for this film. And Judi Dench, she had a very long career. In an interview before the making of Philomena, she talked about how she and her husband wanted to adopt a child. They took steps to adopt a child. They were unable to adopt a child for two reasons. One, they were over 40. And two, she was a Quaker. Her husband was Catholic. And that created a problem at the time for the agencies. And so she was very public. This interview, she was an interview she did with one outlet. It got spread all over the place. And then a handful of years later, she makes Philomena. And when she's on the press tour for Philomena, she is saying, because she met Philomena while she was prepping for the role, she says, all of these very complimentary things about Philomena and, huge empathy for what Philomena has gone through. But at no point could I find anywhere where Judi Dench made this connection between what she and her husband tried to do and in fact would have done. And probably if it were more contemporary times, 40's nothing anymore in the way of adoptive parents. Like, at no point in time did she say, wow, and meeting Philomena really made me think about that time that my husband and I tried to adopt. Like, again, this is someone who's got a huge platform. Like, what an opportunity to talk about how you perhaps learned something different from this person whose story you are telling and who you purport to have empathy for.
Interesting. I'm so proud of all your research. Well done. Look at you, just digging up all those things. All right. Do any of us have any more to say before Kristal gives us her award? Actually, Kristal, you're giving an award, not us, but I think we do deserve an award. But anyway.
You do deserve an award always. This is the Never Stopped Being a Mother Award. This award recognizes the first mothers who are hidden away in shame and cruelly labeled unworthy. The mothers who were convinced that the best and highest choice for their child was not them and were coerced into signing. The mothers whose children were told lies about who they were and the love that they had for them. The mothers who never gave up searching, who were navigating impossible circumstances. And for the mothers who thought of their baby every single day, that despite what the adoption papers said, they never stopped being their mother. We honor the courage it took to simply survive. That's my award. Listeners, viewers, and pop stars, we would love to hear from you. What award would you give the film Philomena or to a character in the film? Leave your comments for us on Instagram or YouTube.
Can't wait to hear them. Adoption Pop is podcast journalist Haley Radke,
filmmaker Kristal Parke,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we relied on The Lost Child of Philomena Lee by Martin Sixsmith, Judi Dench for variety, playing Philomena was a great responsibility, the Sydney Morning Herald, Judi Dench's only child regret, Rory Carroll for The Guardian, Irish Church and State apologize for callous mother and baby homes, and Jane Russell and the Springtown Mother, produced by Owen McFadden for the BBC.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating in your podcast app, find and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're living inside a reality television show and everyone knows it but you? Break the fourth wall with us next week on Adoption Pop.